You already know what happened last week. You watched the maps turn orange, you saw the records fall at Kew Gardens, and you read the headlines about Britain beating Greece in May. But here is the thing that most people missed in the aftermath of those record-breaking days. The heat did not simply stop and walk away once the peak passed. It retreated just enough to allow a brief, slightly cooler window to cross the country before setting up for the next act. And that next act is already on the forecast charts. This Friday, across almost every county in England, temperatures are climbing back toward territory that meteorologists are again describing as well above average for the time of year. The southeast is heading back toward 26 degrees Celsius. London is in the mid-20s, Manchester is sitting at 23, and Athens, for reference, is forecast at around 24 degrees on the same day. Britain is going to beat Greece again. To understand the temperature picture county by county for this Friday, you first need to understand the atmospheric setup that is producing it, because the mechanism this time is slightly different from the record-breaking event that came before. The extraordinary bank holiday heat that pushed Kew Gardens to 34.8 degrees on Monday and then 35.1 degrees on Tuesday was driven by a deep continental heat plume. Warm air originating over North Africa, dragged northward across Spain and France, and accelerated into Britain by a powerful ridge of high pressure extending from the Azores. That event was a direct injection of superheated continental air into a country that had no way to absorb it. What is happening for Friday is different in its mechanics, but similar in its outcome. The warming this time is being driven primarily by high pressure developing over and near the UK itself, with winds beginning to shift to a more southerly track by the end of the week. That southerly component will again draw warmer air from the continent. But even without a full continental plume, the high-pressure dome trapping solar radiation over the country is sufficient on its own to push temperatures far above the seasonal average, and the sustained sunshine forecast for most of England and Wales on Friday will drive afternoon peaks into territory that continues to make the Athens comparison not just valid, but understated. Starting in the southeast, which will again be the hottest corner of the country on Friday. The forecast is for highs between 25 and 27 degrees Celsius across the counties clustered around the Thames estuary and the home counties. Kent is forecast to reach 26 to 27 degrees in inland areas, with coastal strips running a degree or two cooler as sea temperatures, currently sitting at around 13 degrees Celsius in the English Channel, drag the air temperature downward wherever onshore breezes develop in the afternoon. Surrey and East Sussex are in the 25 to 26 degree range. Essex and Suffolk, which benefit from the continental airflow arriving across the narrowest part of the North Sea, are forecast at 25 to 26 degrees, with some local spots potentially touching 27. Cambridgeshire and Hertfordshire sit in the 25 degree bracket. Greater London as a whole is forecast at 25 to 26 degrees. For residents of Hackney, Lambeth, or Southwark, the actual experienced temperature on Friday afternoon will be closer to 27 or 28 degrees in dense urban areas away from parks and open water. Moving into central England, the East Midlands will see highs in the 23 to 25 degree range, with Leicestershire and Nottinghamshire at the warmer end, and Derbyshire sitting slightly cooler as elevation moderates the afternoon peak. Lincolnshire, which featured prominently during last week's record-breaking event because of its flat, unshaded agricultural landscape that's sitting in the center of England away from both the cooling influence of the sea and the elevation of the Pennines, are forecast at 24 to 25 degrees. The West Midlands conurbation, Birmingham, Wolverhampton, Coventry, carries its own urban heat signature and is forecast at 23 to 24 degrees, potentially higher in the urban core where heat absorption by built surfaces will push local readings above the regional average. Across the south and southwest of England, the temperature picture is somewhat more varied because sea proximity plays a larger role in moderating afternoon heat. Hampshire and Dorset are forecast at 23 to 25 degrees, with inland areas of the New Forest and the Avon Valley reaching higher than coastal, towns like Bournemouth and Southampton, where sea breezes will compete with the southerly warm airflow. Wiltshire and Somerset, sitting inland in the broad agricultural plains between the Mendips and Salisbury Plain, are forecast at 23 to 24 degrees. Devon and Cornwall present the most complex picture in the southwest, with temperature ranges spanning from around 20 degrees on exposed Atlantic-facing coasts, where cooler oceanic air dominates, to 22 to 23 degrees inland around Exeter and Truro, where solar heating accumulates without the moderating sea influence. Gloucestershire and Oxfordshire are forecast at 23 to 24 degrees, sitting in the comfortable middle range of the south of England picture. Turning north, Yorkshire presents the characteristic north-south divide that becomes more pronounced as warm spells extend across the country. North Yorkshire are forecast at 21 to 23 degrees. East Yorkshire's coast will again be among the cooler spots in the region as the North Sea, still running at temperatures far below what would be needed to warm rather than cool the adjacent coastline, drags coastal readings down to 17 to 19 degrees even on what will be a warm day inland. Lancashire is forecast at around 20 to 22 degrees, with the urban centres of Manchester and Salford reaching 23 degrees, as the Met Office specifically noted in its county-level guidance. In the northeast, Durham, Northumberland, and Tyne and Wear face the coastal cooling effect more strongly than almost any other region in England, because the North Sea fret, cold, damp air rolling inland off the sea, can reduce temperatures by 5 to 8 degrees from what would otherwise develop under Fridays, languishing in the low to mid-teens, even while inland areas bake. This is one of Britain's most dramatic local weather contrasts, and it is at its most pronounced precisely during warm, sunny, high-pressure days of the kind Friday will deliver. Wales presents a strongly varied picture driven by both coastal exposure and elevation. South Wales, and particularly the Vale of Glamorgan, the Severn Estuary Corridor, and the urban areas of Cardiff and Swansea, are forecast at 20 to 22 degrees. The Met Office confirmed Cardiff specifically at 20 degrees in its headline county forecasts. Central Wales, where the hills of the Brecon Beacons and the Cambrian Mountains dominate the landscape, will see lower temperatures driven by altitude and the remnant cloud that tends to form over elevated ground during atmospheric transitions. North Wales, particularly Anglesey and the Llyn Peninsula, will be moderated by the Irish Sea and is forecast at 18 to 20 degrees, with sheltered inland valleys potentially reaching 21 to 22 degrees if southerly winds deliver. Warmer air before any sea influence moderates the afternoon peak. Scotland as a whole will be significantly cooler than England on Friday, with the Met Office forecasting a clear north-south temperature gradient that becomes especially pronounced as you cross the Scottish border. The Scottish borders and southern lowlands around Edinburgh and Glasgow are forecast at 17 to 20 degrees, warm by Scottish May standards and above seasonal average, but far removed from the extreme heat the English southeast will experience simultaneously. Highland Scotland, where the forecast includes variable cloud and the potential for showers on the western side, will see temperatures in the low to mid-teens, with the Cairngorms and Northwest Highlands potentially struggling to reach 15 degrees in areas where persistent cloud suppresses solar heating throughout the day. Northern Ireland is forecast in a similar range to southern Scotland, with highs of 16 to 19 degrees across most of the province and slightly warmer conditions in sheltered inland areas of Fermanagh and Armagh. The Athens comparison that is producing headlines this week is technically accurate, but carries more complexity than the single number presentation suggests. Athens on Friday is forecast at approximately 24 degrees Celsius, warm for a European capital that people associate with Mediterranean heat, but actually below Greece's own seasonal norms for late May, when the city typically reaches the high 20s or low 30s. The comparison is effective as a communication device precisely because it inverts the expectation that British people carry about their country's climate relative to southern Europe. When London or Manchester sits at a temperature that Athens would consider a mild spring day, it is jarring in a way that a technically accurate but contextually flat statement, such as noting that 26 degrees is several degrees above the seasonal average, simply is not. The comparison cuts through. But what the comparison also does, when examined carefully, is reveal the direction in which both countries' climates are moving. Athens is not a stable benchmark. Greece has been experiencing its own extreme heat trajectory, with the 2023 summer bringing wildfires that burned for weeks across the country and a death toll from heat-related illness that exceeded any previous summer in the country's modern history. The temperature at which Athens sits on a random late May Friday is not the temperature at which Athens will sit on that same Friday in 2035 or 2045. Both countries are on warming trajectories. The gap between them is not fixed. It is closing, not because Britain is becoming the Mediterranean, but because both climates are being driven toward higher and higher baselines by the same global forcing that produced last Monday's record-breaking 35.1 degrees at Kew Gardens. What makes this Friday significant, beyond the county temperature list and the Athens comparison, is what it represents in the pattern of 2026's weather story. This is the second warm surge in the space of 10 days. Between last Tuesday's peak and this Friday's renewed warmth, temperatures briefly dipped back towards seasonal norms before the high-pressure system reasserted itself and drove the thermometer back up. That pattern of peaks, partial retreats, and then renewed warmth arriving faster than expected is the signature of a summer that is running structurally hotter than its predecessors. The Met Office's 3-month seasonal outlook for summer 2026 placed the probability of a hot season at double the climatological norm, with the first 3. Weeks of that meteorological summer have already delivered as not a single anomalous event, but a sequence of warm spells with decreasing recovery time between them. The county temperature list for this Friday is not a curiosity. It is the next line in a story that started breaking records last week and shows no signs of slowing down.